Let's get wild.
This is going to be funny as it comes out as you just did that.
Okay.
Ayurveda and sex. When this is coming up, as we are learning balance with the habits, I'm always unclear as being a quite self-conscious person, like where that balance fits in, because the more I self-care for myself, the less I actually want external. But then I've recognized as cleansing, like we'll do enemas to cleanse, and like there's just that whole internal space that is kind of eluding me right now, and where that fits in externally and then to myself. That's probably a pretty broad question.
Yeah, go ahead. Keep talking it through. So is it like a frequency question? Is it a lack of change of desire question?
I don't know. Maybe like if I honor my body, my frequency is fine, but my partner does not believe so at all. But then I worry that maybe, like when we speak of self-massage, I'd never done that before, and I realized that intimacy with myself of touching my own skin has brought about some very interesting changes for me emotionally and mentally. And so I've noticed my self-esteem building or self-worth. But I can say it's just such a very open, vulnerable question. Everyone can see my face. That
so like, who can relate? Who can relate? Like, just raise your hand if you're like, I'm kind of curious. Like, here, I can kind of relate. So, yeah, we're with you. So something happens. I think this is what, like, we're having a discussion now. So we're not laser coaching. We're having a discussion. So this is a different kind of a conversation, right, than what we just did with Mariah. And so this is like, we'll have a little mini brief discussion about Ayurveda and sex, and really what happens on the path of self-care. And I would even say beyond self-care, I'm not like the biggest fan of that term. I'm really into the term body integrity. Like, what is that? Like, what does it mean to be in integrity with ourself and in our body? And sex is a body thing, right? I mean, it's like everything kind of is a body thing, and everything's kind of an emotional thing, and everything's kind of a mental thing, and everything's kind of an intuitive thing. Like, everything is kind of at all levels, so we get that. But when we're bodies touching bodies and squirting stuff into each other's bodies, there's like, it's really body at some level. So in the path to body integrity, where we start to see the subtle triggers of cause and effect, are we all starting to notice that, of like becoming much more aware of like, I have this thought, and then I'm putting this thing in my mouth, or I'm having this emotion, and then I'm wanting to say this, and we're slowing down the cause and effect, and cause and effect. Like, I rub oil in my skin, and all of a sudden I'm not that interested in having someone else touch me. It's a cause and effect. Like, I like don't actually want. I'm noticing these habits increase my self-awareness and my natural self-love. Right? One of the side effects or side benefits of body integrity is like, you love yourself. You're kind of in love with yourself. Not leading yourself towards harm, emotional harm or physical harm. Right? Even mental harm. Like, you're no longer doing a lot of like self-abusing thought entertainment. Anyone noticing that one? Like, oh, I no longer bring myself down. Actually, I'm much more like pumping myself up, believing in myself, learning from my yesterdays, not beating myself up. Right? And as we do this, all of a sudden, that starts to change our external relationships. Right? And now what we want from other people might be really different. We might not need other people to affirm us. And maybe we were using sex for affirmation. Who knows? And maybe not, but like maybe we're as we're noticing we have more of this body integrity, more of this self-love as a side benefit of body integrity, we're noticing like we just really don't need other people for nearly as much. We've become like super independent on one level. Is anyone noticing? You guys can just like nod. I just want to see like, you know, from the choir, an amen, hallelujah. Like, let me know you guys are resonating. That kind of helps. Like, kind of, right? This is where it's fun to see everyone's faces, because otherwise before I used to speak into a vacuum. But I trust my intuition in coaching is another little coaching note, especially for those of you who are just doing teleconference coaching. I did that primarily for the last decade straight, 10 years. And you could just feel it and just trust that intuitive voice. That's like they're getting it or they're not getting it. That's my best advice there. Okay, so the more we have body integrity, the more our relationships are bound to change. Agreed? There's a new factor. There's just a new factor. It's like a couple has a baby, the relationship changes. I had a breakfast interview with Tammy Simon, the head of Sounds True, and they just brought a new puppy in their house. Their relationship's changing because the puppy, right? You bring a new factor in, the relationship changes. You bring body integrity into a relationship. One person comes into the relationship with body integrity that didn't have it before. New ball game, right? And so then you're noticing like, oh, it's changing my sex life. Great. And you're doing the right thing. You're noticing it. You're talking about it. You're curious about it. You're seeing like, hey, is this happening with anyone else? Like, what the hell's going on here? Where does this lead? And so then what might happen is then you ask your question of like, okay, so now that I'm not wanting X, Y, and Z for sex, maybe unconsciously, maybe subconsciously, maybe in my shadow issues, right? Because now those issues are out of the shadow and I'm getting that from a deeper source. So now the question is like, why do I want to have sex? And then go deep into that. Because I know what it is for me, but I don't know what it is for you. And I know it changes. You know, it can really change. And what's so cool is the studies on sex are like, have more, it's really good for you. Right? And so it's like with the right partner, like with the right set of assumptions, with the right rules in place, like it's really good for your physiology. So there's some really positive stuff like on like the yogi brahmacharya path, I would say for the most part, like that whole path of brahmacharya in terms of sex has been scientifically discluded. It's like, nope, that's not healthy. Healthier people have a lot more sex. Right? Like we see that like they're more relaxed, they're more in the flow, they're physiologically juicier. There's a lot of science behind like sex is really, really, really healthy. It doesn't mean the concept of brahmacharya, the concept of pointing your energy in the direction you want to go and saying no to everything else is not a really good idea, because that is a really good idea. Sign up for YHC, say no to like all the stuff that's going to get in the way of it, and you will do so much better in the goals that you've set for yourself here, whether they're income or impact goals. Right? That's the concept of brahmacharya. So that aside, just like sex is okay, sex is good for you, sex is super healthy. Ricky, what do you want from sex next? If you no longer need body confidence, if you no longer need acceptance from another person, then what are you in it for? And then just do that as an inquiry practice.
Okay.
Anything to add from the choir? Was that fun? Everyone's like, thanks, Ricky. That was fun.
I just want to, am I still on?
Yeah, you're on.
Oh okay. I have to say, as you're saying that, I never actually really thought about it too much prior, or could maybe put it all together. But I just feel like I'm a whole different person now. And so I don't really, especially being with someone else for as long as I have been, I almost don't feel like I'm the same, almost like I'm losing my virginity again. Like, how did it ever let somebody in that space when I'm still so new to this body all of a sudden?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So that might be okay. Like that's coming up, to put some boundaries and to honor that and give, you know,
Yeah.
and then maybe there's a time, I mean, it's interesting. A lot of the brahmacharya paths have timelines to them. Like, I just want to be in my own thing for X amount of time. Sometimes it's a year, sometimes it's 6 months, sometimes it's 30 days. And you might notice like 14 days in, you're like, oh, I really want to have sex for this reason. Like, it might get more clear why you might want, even if it's just like a super subtle 3 layers buried inkling of a desire, because sometimes it is that.
Okay.
Too. I think it's an interesting thing, as I mean, to me, it's a really interesting thing. And I can speak personally to this. Like, for me, like, my energy is so upper chakra. I mean, grounded in the body, but it's more first chakra than sensual desire. It's kind of just my natural wiring. So if I go back in my sex history, like when I was the most into sex, it was really sex for power. It was. It was like, no, like totally. It was like for clout. It really was. And if you look historically at like why have women had sex historically over time, you're going to find there's a number of different reasons. And some of them were very like body affirmation. Like, I want to feel beautiful. By you having sex with me, you make me feel like I am that. For others, it's power, right? Like, it's a conquest. For me, it was all conquest. Like, after the conquest, I was like, oh, this is kind of boring. Seriously. I know, right? For others, it's just like they love the sensuality of it. Like the second chakra, people who are just like more body time. Like, I have friends that could just have sex like 5 hours a day every single day. They're like, why would you do anything else? And I'm like, wow, really? Mm-hmm. And that's second chakra. That's like sex for the sake of sex.
Okay.
Right? Which is a really good place, I think, for people to end up at. Not to live from, right? Not to get stuck in, but like to end up at.
Okay.
You asked at the beginning of sex from an Ayurvedic perspective. I've been asked to talk. The reason I'm kind of diving deep into this discussion, while I know a lot of you guys have a lot more other questions, is I've had a number of requests to talk about this in the last 6 months, and I just realized I've not spent. And like I said, it's not like it's not a place I orient from, so it's not like a big part of my life. It's not like a big thing for me. But the Ayurvedic perspective on it is really kind of cool, like, because they actually throw some numbers in the game, and metrics are always good. So the biggest concern, I mean, a few of the bigger concerns in Ayurveda are, honestly, if I would say like what the biggest concern is from the schooling perspective, is excess sex that leads to depletion. And that's not usually a feminine issue, it's a masculine issue, right? This whole system of science is patriarchal in nature, right? Like it or not, that's its history. There's this thread. So it's like, if you ejaculate way too much, you'll wear yourself out and you can't think anymore. You can't get stuff done. Whether your stuff is like in the priestly class, whether it's in the marketplace class, whether it's a warrior cast, or whether it's in like clean up after everybody else forecasts. Right? You can't do your dharma. You can't do your duty if you're having sex all the time. Right? And I think on the feminine side of it, it's like if you get too lost in that sensual, emotional body, the same is true. You lose the thread of dharma. So if that's the number one concern there, and then you see, like, does that apply to my life? For some of you, it's like maybe yes, maybe kind of, but most of it's like, no, not really. Like, that's not where I tend to go. Empowered women don't tend to get lost there. Do you guys agree with me there? Mm-hmm. This isn't like you don't post this on a Facebook ad of like, are you just spending way too much time having sex to like get and at the end of the whatever, to like do your job well, and like women, like that is not, it'll get a high curiosity click, but there won't be any like follow through interest on that one. For men, like men are triggered to think about sex. I think biologically they're triggered to think about sex every 90 seconds. For an adult male, it's really, and that might be a low number. We're wired entirely differently. So when you see that the number one topic from the number one concern from Ayurveda is excessive sex, excessive ejaculation, or excessive like loss of fluids, for the most part, like women having more sex is good. You get juicier. Like there's not that same concern because you're not ejaculating semen. Okay, So that's one perspective on that. If we look at the numbers, kaphas should have more sex because it's exercise. Just exercise. You're actually moving your body, and that's good. And they also, if again, we're in the male sphere here, they're ejaculating more. They're moving more energy out of their body. The number one thing kapha need to do is dissipate, not gather. They gather. They hoard, gathers to the point of hoarding. When you hoard so much, you guys ever been in a hoarder's house? Have you seen those? Like, isn't there a reality TV show? What is it?
Hoarders.
Hoarders. Right? Yeah, this is so good to understand any kind of kapha disease. Watch the show Hoarders once, or even watch it for 5 minutes and just get an experience of what it's like. Imagine you're now in a cell.
Oh.
You're now in a cell. It's not a house. It's one cell of a hoarder's body, of like an excess kapha body. And there's like these little, like they can almost, they got to step over this. And you guys know what I'm talking about? Like there's no space in a room. There's piles of newspaper that go, there's like trash from like last year in the corner, or maybe they're a clean hoarder and there's not trash, but there's just too much furniture, there's too much stuff everywhere. So for the kapha of sex, they're just getting stuff out. They're just pushing stuff out of their body. More, better for the most part. But still, on average, the recommendation is twice a week. Pittas, who are so in their head, and it's good for them to get some energy lower down in their body, the recommendation is once a week. Why not more than that? Because they don't have as much energy. Again, masculine perspective, not feminine. They don't have excess energy to just like shoot out. And then for Vata, it even goes to like once every couple weeks to like once a month. 12 shots a year to fire. Right? So, you know, and yet, like the typical, I would say the typical westernized male is led to believe they should, I mean, some to have sex at least once a day, if not ejaculate once a day on their own and have sex with a human being another time a day, so like twice a day. And that's a lot of like modern culture. So there's going to, all of you, if you, in your partnerships with men or with women, right, you guys asked me about Ayurveda. Again, Ayurveda is coming from a patriarchal masculine perspective. So I gave you that. Does everyone understand that? That's not my perspective. That was just like what I've absorbed from Ayurveda. So now we live in a time where same sex and all different kinds of sexual relationships are all fair game, right? And societally accepted, hopefully, in most parts. Obviously not, but we wish they were. And so what are the rules for us? Right? What are the guidelines for you? And that's really what you want to get interested. For the people you're coaching, what are some guidelines you can give that might be helpful? And where I ended up with that is that initial conversation I had with Ricky of like, let this be an exploration of like what you want. I'm not sure we actually know the answer to this. Right? For the most part, like the places, the world's in a really different place in terms of population than it was 4,000 years ago, than it was 2,000 years ago. Like we're no longer having procreative sex to populate the earth. Like that game is over. Right? We don't need more, we don't need to grow the population rate of growth on planet Earth. So when you take that out of the game, and then you say, okay, well, sex for connection, sex for pleasure, sex for actually for organ vitality. These are some really good questions to have. And then what phase of life are we in? If you're in your 20s, you've got a lot of energy to discharge, right? If you're in your 60s, you might even want connection more in a spiritual plane than you were when you're 20s. Like I said, in my 20s, it was all like in my teens and 20s, it was all about the conquest, right? Like that was the name of my game. And that worked for a certain period of time. And then I've been in a monogamous relationship for like 20 years, forever, right? So like that game ended pretty quick for me. So then all of a sudden the energy of conquest went out of the bedroom, right? And I started getting, so then, oh, well, what is it for this next phase? And I think for us to be really present that at the end of the day, with most of our coaching clients, it's like, hey, it's about body integrity. As you step into greater body integrity, it's going to shift your relationships. And just start to be curious and open and start to have these conversations really coming from your new experiences of body integrity. And if you feel that some of your old agreements that you had around how many times you have sex a week or what sex is like and meeting someone's needs, or like if that all of a sudden feels out of alignment with you, like good, congratulations, good for you for listening. That's a demonstration that you're in a new, you've kind of hit a new horizon there. And so now go to that chapter in Body Thrive, How to Evolve Your Habits and Relationship. It's right in the middle of the book, between habit 5 and habit 6, and read that and do some exercise with your mate. And see and don't be afraid of what comes up, or be afraid and presence your fear of like, this is scary and I'm going to do it anyway around what comes up. And then just the next chapter. And I think when we start to get like the next chapter is never forever, that can really help of like, what's going to work for us in the next chapter? And can we now redefine a relationship agreement around sex for the next chapter?